Greetings, friends, and welcome to this edition of Tales from the Tabletop, the video series where I scour the internet and my own personal experiences to bring you anecdotes of adventure. The fun, the funny, the farcical, and the teachable moments, from Warhammer to D&D and everything in between. And I take my favorite story and illustrate it for your listening and viewing pleasure. Today's first story has got no small amount of orcs in it, which, not gonna lie, that makes me happy. So, let's dive in, and our first story comes from Daniel. Daniel writes, "It was D&D 3.5 in Eberron, with the party storming an orc castle and getting split up. The party wizard, played by Jay, enters a room where an orc cleric is summoning something. Having the drop on him, Jay kills the orc quickly and then casts Disguise Self to make himself look like that orcish cleric. A few moments later, the party's ranger, played by Dina, entered the room and I described the scene. There's a summoning circle marked in the middle of the floor and an altar at the far end of the room. You can see the legs of an orc sticking out from behind the altar, and what seems to be an orc cleric in the middle of the room." I was, at this point, half expecting some metagaming to avoid attacking the party wizard, but, to my impressed surprise, the rogue responded as if she had no idea the orc cleric was really the wizard, and quickly shot him from the doorway. Me, okay, well done, Jay, you take 9 damage. Thinking, good, she played it perfectly in character. I made a note to award some extra experience points for good role-playing, until Dina piped in, "Wait, huh? Why is Jay taking damage?" 'Cause you shot him?" Dina is shocked. "That was Jay's character? But I didn't know!" Jay says, It's fine. Your character wouldn't have known it was me." Another player says, "You weren't paying much attention, were you, D?" Dina shakes her head over and over and says, "I'm really sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. I wouldn't have fired if I had known." I say nothing. I just quietly erase the extra experience points from Dina's character sheet behind my DM screen. On another occasion, in a Warhammer fantasy roleplay, the party needed someone who could drive their new, stolen coach. So they decided to hire an NPC. This is fine, but they hired him by walking in a tavern in the middle of the morning and shouting, "Hey, can anyone here drive a coach?" They hired the first person who said yes. 2 hours later, they are traveling along when they notice a few things. Their new driver was passed out holding an empty bottle of brandy. The reins had been dropped and were trailing along the ground under the coach. The coach was picking up speed, and there was a sharp bend in the road ahead. One of the party tried to jump on the back of the coach horse and rein them in. Rolled decks, failed, and fell under the coach. Made his saving throw so the wheels didn't get him. Eventually, the party's elf bounty hunter, who had his own horse, managed to ride alongside and bring the coach to a stop just in time. Other fun moments from that campaign. When the party was defending a farm from a late-night goblin raid, the wizard, human, so no night vision, the wizard ran out of spell points, so he drew his sword and charged out into the dark. Me and the elf found him the next morning, almost dead, in a ditch, looking like a wizard pincushion. Seems he'd run right into a pack of night goblins with short bows, and night goblins can see in the dark. The same wizard miscast his fireball spell, so it went off in his face. Not so bad in itself, but we had to laugh when the GM asked him, to read what he had in his equipment list. Let's see. A sword, a dagger, some feathers for quills, a bag of sulfur, 5 pints of lamp oil. I'm dead, aren't I? He wasn't, but damn close. This next one is a short story about a player's most memorable game in a session of D&D or other role-playing game, and this one is anonymous, and this one reads, "Oddly enough, one of the most memorable sessions for me wasn't some epic villain encounter, it wasn't a huge story development, it was a simple, low-level encounter with some orcs. The party were sent to deal with a group of orcs who happened to be chilling out in a cave. They killed the lookout silently and decided to lure the rest of the orcs out and ambush them. The party spent quite a while coming up with traps and other ways to set up the ambush. The monk used his special minor illusion cantrip to make the sounds of an orc calling for one of his buddies. We rolled well, and the orcs didn't. They found a large boulder outside the top of the cave and used that to crush an orc or two. I think they also set up a tripwire to knock the orcs over if they came running out. When the fight actually started, half the orcs were already dead. The other half soon followed. I remember this simple encounter because it was just such a perfect example of what every encounter in D&D should be like, if possible. It shouldn't be a matter of just, here are the bad guys, roll initiative. The players should have as much opportunity as possible to come up with creative ways of dealing with the enemies, rather than just charging in and initiating combat. Anytime I come up with an encounter now, I always look back on that session and try to make sure my encounter has several possible paths that players can take if they decide to do something creative. And I think that is a lesson to us all. And that's a beautiful story, and I am 100% going to carry that ethos, that idea with me into the adventures that I write. This next story comes from Bailey, and it is titled, "We glitched a dungeon because one member of our party was a god's old friend from Deity University. In order for us to find the last soul stone we needed to summon the Grim Reaper, we had to go through the mountain god's personal dungeon. However, one member of our party was a lizard man, who would have been the god of salesmen if he hadn't gotten stoned at every opportunity at Deity U, and flunked out every single class. Did he go to Deity State University or University of Deities? I'm sorry, I'm in North Carolina, UNC, NC State joke. I apologize. Due to them knowing each other and being old drinking buddies, our salesman friend bartered for a few hints. It turned out that the swinging axes in the first tunnel phased out of existence in the dead center of the tunnel, and we could deactivate them by simply walking through and pulling a lever. The next room was full of zombies. It would have been very difficult to fight our way through. So, the mountain god gave us a magical rock that increased ranged attacks by 4 to break a magic lantern on the ceiling, which would burn all 30 zombies immediately. We then went into the final room, Indiana Jones'd the Soul Stone, and booked it out of there. Needless to say, that was the easiest dungeon we have ever explored." This next story comes from The Seventh Side, and he writes, "I had set a trap room for my players. They had a squabble over a magical sword beforehand, so there was a little tension in the group in-game, and the one who managed to get the sword decided to go to the conveniently placed well in the middle of the room to take a drink. Everyone eyeballed each other behind the wizard's back, and then they grabbed him and threw him in. None of them knew quite what it was. It was a magical well. Anyone who drank from it who didn't have an evil alignment would instantly fall asleep. Anyone who fell into it was transported to a demon realm for a few minutes and then falls into the room directly below in the material plane. Once the rest of the room got to the room directly below this well, where Bob was, yes, the wizard's name was Bob, Bob was sitting in a corner of that room, sobbing and rocking back and forth. The demons tried breaking his mind to possess him, but only managed to break him just before he came out of the other end. Lucky roll. Now, in the second room, if you look up, you can see right through the well into the room above. The water simply suspends at the ceiling and doesn't cascade to the floor the way water should fall. It's just suspended there, like an invisible barrier stopping it. This next story comes from RPG Horror Stories, but as usual, it comes with a teachable moment, and this story comes from user Lucavia at Work. First time campaign derailed by an aggressive player. This happened a while back, but it was basically the first and only horror story that I have ever had while tabletop gaming. First and only, so we're off to a good start. So back when I was in high school, my best friend invited me to an ongoing campaign that he was DMing for his local friends. I was pretty well acquainted with the three of them by this point, and we figured this could be a pretty enjoyable experience for everyone involved, as they all had quite a few campaigns under their belt. But this would be the first time I ever played D&D, or any role-playing game, with anyone for that matter. Ran a private intro session with me to sort of coach me in the proper etiquette and to give me the basics, and we all thought that my addition to their campaign was looking to be fun for everyone. My character was a snarky halfling rogue who was a thief by necessity, but he had dreams of becoming a dancer and winning the heart of many a fair maiden. My DM's idea to get me into the party was to have me hide amongst the adventuring party to escape the guards after I got caught stealing. He had checked this idea over with his friends beforehand, and all of them said they were fine with it. But the second we played out the scene, one of his friends, who was playing a lawful neutral fighter, immediately turned my character into the guards, stating to the DM that his character would never join a party with someone like my character, and that this is what my character would do. My DM and I both were a little caught off guard by this, especially since we had already run this by him, and he said it was cool. But the DM quickly recovered and crafted some story about how I was conscripted to help the party at the local lord's behest. I played my character as friendly and non-combative with this party as I could, but every attempt to push the narrative forward, our fighter would just derail the party discussions to start berating my character again. Our first night of adventuring, I offered to keep watch first, as I had the best rolls for it, and our fighter refused to sleep. He gave me a lengthy, in-character threat about how he can't stand thieves and is going to kill my character the first chance he gets. The next morning, we go shopping for supplies, and my character ends up being 2 gold short of what he needs to buy for his gear, so he asks the fighter for money. The fighter was our designated treasurer, and he had the majority of the party's money on his person. The fighter refused and threatened my character again. Considering the situation, I thought it'd be fitting and in character to just pickpocket the money I needed off of the fighter, and I rolled to do so. Natural 20. The DM explains how I was so deft with my pickpocketing, not a single person noticed, and how, since I was the only one who still had anything to buy, No one was going to suspect anything until much later. I was pretty proud of this, and the rest of the table all starts having a chuckle about it. Except for our fighter, who stands up at the table and loudly announces to all of us that my character shouts, "Just so everyone knows, if I catch any of you stealing my gold, I will kill you here and now," with absolutely no in-game provocation whatsoever. My DM stops the campaign to explain to him, "You didn't catch him. You have no reason to suspect that even happened." To which the fighter player just starts trying to justify how his character would just intuitively know. My DM eventually gives up, exasperated as the argument is going nowhere and he just wants to move the campaign along already. And our fighter immediately stands up again and says, "I start counting my gold." My DM sighs and tells him he's short 2 gold. And the fighter, without any provocation, attacks my character. I'm still in my starting gear, as this was the reason we were shopping in the first place. I fail my dodge roll, and I get murdered by the fighter before the other players get a chance to intervene, and the fighter then refuses to allow the other players to resurrect me. By this point, the other players are uncomfortable, and everyone just starts agreeing that it's getting late and we should probably stop here for now. We end that session and just never pick up the campaign again. I ask my friend if I did something wrong or if I made a mistake in the way that I played my character. He just tells me he is utterly confused why his friend just started acting like that out of the blue. He tells me later that he confronted that player and they just stood by the earlier claim of, "I was just doing what my character would do." I still play with this DM and his other friends quite frequently, and I've never had another incident of this type since. But ever since that game, the rest of the table started inviting that other player to less and less games, and everyone started to stop hanging out with him as much. I sometimes think back on that first ever session and how that came so close to me almost never trying D&D again, because I spent that whole week wondering if I was just not welcome in that space. So much has changed since then, and I'm honestly so happy my DM and best friend fought so hard to make sure that was a space I was welcome in, and made sure such behavior never happened again. But damn if that wasn't the worst experience I ever had. I don't blame you, man. That would have been rough for me too. And I tell you what, here's the teachable moment, and as per usual, top commenter on Reddit has it. Commenter is user ACK1308. That player was a jerk. The DM should have pulled him up short and told him to knock it off with that nonsense. That's what my character would do. Then make a character who wouldn't. Best of all possible answers. Best answer right there. So I had a moment like this when I was playing a role-playing game. I was playing a game of Morkborg. Surprised, I know. If you've been watching this channel for a little bit, take a drink. I was playing at a convention and I was playing with strangers. I'd never met these people before. Lovely folks, very kind, very friendly, funny, had a great time. And we reached a moment where my character had his arm around a new player at the table, and we're walking across the bridge, and I'm trying to calm him down that the nightmare hellscape he's living in isn't really that bad. And as I'm doing so, our last party members bringing up the rear, 2 skeletons pop out of the ground and start attacking. And my character would look, see that, grab this guy closer, and just keep walking. That's what my character would do. So I stopped the game. I did one of these, said, "Hey, hold on. I'm real sorry." My character would just leave my friend here high and dry. But that would A, split the party, and B, that would be kind of a douchebag move to this player, to this new friend that I had made. So I'm not sure how to reconcile what my character would do versus what would be better for our game master and for my new party mate. And so we had a very brief discussion, and the game master says, well, you know, in this scenario, you've all been friends for kind of a while. He says, really? So we're close friends? So this is one of those, like, I would absolutely take an arrow for this friend. It's like, yes, you would, this person means something to you. Got it. Okay. Turn it around. I see skeletons. I turn around, draw weapons, and just shriek and try attacking because my character's not a fighter, so attacking is the bad move, but that's the move my character would do if he really cared about the other player at the table. Similarly, I said, hey, now that I know we're actually friends, when I told you I had 1 healing potion on me earlier, yeah, I lied. I've got 4. All right, this next story is the final story. It is the one that I've been illustrating this whole time. It was a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it's worth the wait. The story answers the question, what is your favorite thing that ever happened in Dungeons & Dragons? And this anonymous commenter writes, some nights you have a good time, some nights everything sucks, but there are some nights when everything sucks so much that it turns into hilarity and becomes an amazing night that you remember for years. Reminds me of my honeymoon. The party was tracking a band of orcs through the mountains. They were looking for a mysterious tomb that held an item of great power, and had to find it before the orcs. It was also one of those sessions where the players are mostly joking and not taking the game seriously at all. As the DM running the game, I did my best to tone the jokes down and keep the adventure serious and dramatic. I'm not opposed to jokes, but that night, the only thing that was happening were the jokes. At one point, the party was traversing a mountain trail, and the dwarf insulted the human. The human insulted the dwarf back. The dwarf responded with an insult in a different language, and they kept insulting each other back and forth in different languages until one of them used an orcish swear word. And then I couldn't keep it together any longer. After hurling that insult in orcish, you hear an orcish voice above you calling, "Oi, who goes there?" At that moment, the party encountered Pugdush and Verk, 2 orcs that had been left behind to guard a special rock that was lying on the ground between them. The rock, just a regular old rock, was extremely valuable, as the orc captain had instructed them, and thus had chosen his 2 smartest orcs from his company to stay behind and guard it at any cost. After killing Verk, the players began tossing the rock among themselves while Pugdush ran around after the rock. And then the dwarf decided he had had enough and threw the rock over the cliff and into the abyss, which Pugdush followed by jumping off the cliff after the rock, screaming, "No, my rock!" All of this happened with me using a ridiculous voice to imitate Pugdush. And so the story of Pugdush and the Rock was born. This happened some 13 years ago, and we still remember it. And is that not just the perfect way to punctuate why this game and games like these are so much fun, so compelling, and why folks like us just get so into it? 13 years, and it's still a funny story. This writer is either anonymous or I didn't see the username. I apologize, but I tell you what, the story of Pugdush and the Rock, I'm going to sit down and write a narrative of that story. I have to, because it's so much fun, and because the illustration, it's got to have words with it. Look at that. It looks like something out of a storybook. I got kind of lucky with this drawing in that, you know, the lines came out well. You know, as most artists, I don't always feel good about the thing that I finish when I'm done. I feel good about finishing, but the art itself, I'm like, I've been staring at it for so long, I don't know if it's any good at all. This one, I had a great time, and after I looked at it when I was done, I was like, I gotta write a short story about this, so keep an eye out for that one in the future. I figured that Pugdush would be the one that's on the left, the one who's standing a little bit taller with the spike, the Pickelhaube, and Verk would be... perhaps he had been horse-kicked in a previous battle and isn't right anymore. Kind of like his voice in my head is like Schmebulok from Gravity Falls.
Schmebulok!
Is Schmebulok all you can say?
Schmebulok!
Anyway, if you like the original art from this episode, then please find it on my store, on my website, coffeeandhate.biz. Click store at the top, and if it's still there, it can still be yours. And until next time, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and may your dice roll high and never be cursed.